I don't know who Bernie supports over these years. I don't know what he means by social. 1 week it's Denmark. We're going to be like Denmark. Okay, that's harmless. That's basically a capitalist country with a lot of good social welfare programs. Denmark is harmless.
Pretty clearly in the Denmark category, yeah.
Are you sure? How do you know? Did he tell you that?
Well, I mean, that's what he says, and that's what his agenda calls for, right?
Yeah.
He's not calling for any...
Let's see. Let's figure that one out.
Dear friends, my name is Kshama Sawant. I am the socialist on the Seattle City Council.
Denmark is harmless.
Pretty clearly in the Denmark category, yeah.
Are you sure? How do you know? Did he tell you that?
Well, I mean, that's what he says, and that's what his agenda calls for, right? He's not calling for any...
Let's see. Let's figure that one out.
Bernie's socialist campaign is poised to win from Massachusetts to California.
Denmark is harmless.
Pretty clearly in the Denmark category, yeah.
Are you sure? How do you know? Did he tell you that?
Well, I mean, that's what he says, and that's what his agenda calls for, right? He's not calling for any...
Let's see. Let's figure that one out.
A candidate who says billionaires should not exist.
Denmark is harmless.
Pretty clearly in the Denmark category, yeah.
Are you sure? How do you know? Did he tell you that?
Well, I mean, that's what he says, and that's what his agenda calls for, right? He's not calling for any...
Let's see. Let's figure that one out.
In any other country, Joe Biden and I would not be in the same party.
Denmark is harmless.
Pretty clearly in the Denmark category, yeah.
Are you sure? How do you know? Did he tell you that?
Well, I mean, that's what he says, and that's what his agenda calls for, right? He's not calling for any...
Let's see. Let's figure that one out.
And we need a powerful socialist movement to end all capitalist oppression.
Denmark is harmless.
Pretty clearly in the Denmark category, yeah.
Are you sure? How do you know? Did he tell you that?
Well, I mean, that's what he says, and that's what his agenda calls for, right? He's not calling for any...
Let's see. Let's figure that one out.
My organization, Socialist Alternative, is calling for 1 million people in Milwaukee to have Bernie's back.
Denmark is harmless.
Pretty clearly in the Denmark category, yeah.
Are you sure? How do you know? Did he tell you that?
Well, I mean, that's what he says, and that's what his agenda calls for, right? He's not calling for any...
Let's see. Let's figure that one out.
Solidarity.
Denmark is harmless.
Pretty clearly in the Denmark category, yeah.
Are you sure? How do you know? Did he tell you that?
Well, I mean, that's what he says, and that's what his agenda calls for, right? He's not calling for any...
Let's see. Let's figure that one out.
Hello everyone, welcome to NeoUnrealist. Denmark. It's harmless, right? Chris Hayes says Bernie Sanders is clearly in the Denmark category. Nothing to worry about there. There's just one problem with Chris Hayes' Denmark theory. Why is Bernie's campaign full of full-blown Marxists? That woman shrieking at the Bernie Sanders campaign event in the Tacoma Dome over the weekend, that was Seattle City Council member Kshama Sawant. Now, like Senator Bernie Sanders, Kshama Sawant is not actually a member of the Democrat Party. Sawant actually sued the Washington Secretary of State back in 2012 when she unsuccessfully ran for the Washington State House to be listed as a member of an organization called Socialist Alternative on the was supposed to be a nonpartisan ballot. Now that year she fell short back in 2012, but in 2013 she set her sights a little lower and she got a seat on the Seattle City Council, making her the first socialist to sit on Seattle City Council in over a century, since like 1877. Understand that this woman, she was so radical back in 2013 that the other members of the Seattle City Council who were running, who are basically as far left as any other Democrat you could probably imagine, none of them endorsed her candidacy back in 2013. So you get that. She was too far left for even far left Seattle Democrats. Now, already, you might be saying to yourself, but Neo, she's just your run-of-the-mill poser Democratic socialist, right? You'd be wrong. Kshama Sawant is a full-blown, seize the means of production Trotskyist. Kshama Sawant, she's advocated the nationalization of Boeing, Microsoft, and Amazon, and basically I think she'd call herself a clear enemy of capitalism. She has a major problem with capitalism. And make no mistake, enemy is the kind of word that she uses and those in her circles use. Class enemies, basically Marxist gobbledygook. You see, in her warped mind, you could somehow take, for example, Microsoft off the public market, remove it from all competition. Let me just quote her directly. How do we bring the global economy to function in an efficient way, where resources are directed to the most pressing needs, rather than this nonsense of competition? The alternative would be these technological companies, or any other company really, being democratically owned by humanity, by people, precisely because we all have an interest in solving these basic problems. So you'd have this formerly public company become some kind of a quasi-state entity. You know, they'd run Microsoft with no profit motive, no competitiveness, and she thinks somehow this could last 5 minutes in the tech world. I mean, what happens now when that leaderless, rudderless giant with no tangible incentive to do better, because it's just not focused on competition, it's not subject to market forces because she's too busy seeing to people's needs with it. You know, what happens when it's eclipsed by its competitors? What happens to the public's investment in that entity and the tens of thousands of jobs that go with it? You see, the competitors, in order for that to work, they'd either have to be held down by the strong arm of the state, or they too would just have to be seized. So the nightmare of socialists who think that they can freeze a moment in time, you know, economically and technologically, I'll just save that argument for another video. Whether or not you think that this brand of Marxist nonsense is a good idea or not, what she's talking about is clearly not Denmark. So you see, her ambition of a socialist United States, by her own admission, it can't work on its own. A socialist state on its own can't work. She admits that for that to happen, the entire world would have to be made socialist. So all you'd have to do basically is somehow convince or force nearly 8 billion people to live under her idea of socialism. Yeah, I'm starting to think that Chris Hayes is a moron, because the Socialist Alternative Party, basically it's the U.S. section for something called the Committee for a Workers' International that's based out of the United Kingdom, CWI for short. And the CWI is a Trotskyist organization. And just for Chris Hayes' education, I'll read to you some of Kshama Sawant's own article to that Socialist Alternative that she belongs to, this Trotskyist group. It was almost exactly 1 year ago, February 20th, 2019, and the title was, "Hey, let's use Bernie's 2020 campaign to launch a mass working class fight back." So right there, she's writing to her Trotskyist friends in the group that she's part of that they should use the Bernie Sanders campaign. Like every other Marxist revolution, there's always, the ruthless actors in the background. You had Lenin, but then right behind him you had Stalin, looking to exploit a popular figure who they, the old man that they could push out of the way when they've achieved power. Let's see what else she has. The socialists and the left must take full advantage of the potential to organize alongside the millions already moving into struggle and who now will be mobilized around Bernie. I don't know. It sounds to me that this woman's talking about co-opting a movement of people who, probably wouldn't knowingly join a socialist movement, but basically move them into the struggle. I know I've heard this word struggle used before by another socialist in the past. Struggle. Whose struggle was that? Well, it's not important. Chris Hayes says it's okay. Now, she's going to criticize Bernie's decision to run as a Democrat rather than an independent, where she says, "I think Bernie should run as an independent socialist, as I have, and use his campaign to launch a new mass party for working people, instead of running inside a corporate party whose leadership is determined to stop him at all costs. Bernie, unfortunately, has made his decision and is running in the Democratic primary, but it is not acceptable that our political movement becomes imprisoned in this process." You see that? Again, that their movement not become imprisoned within the Democratic Party's process of bourgeois politics, I guess. This is a group of Trotskyists clearly plotting how to make use of the useful idiots in the Democrat Party who are, or basically falling around Bernie should they succeed in helping Bernie take it over from the inside. So she goes on to say, if the Democratic establishment succeeds in once again blocking Bernie, he should continue his run as an independent candidate all the way to November 2020. History doesn't offer an unlimited number of opportunities to build the kind of political force working people need, and we must learn from the past. It couldn't be more plain than right there. She's explicitly saying that should Bernie Sanders not be the Democrat nominee, now obviously let's assume chicanery isn't involved and he loses fairly, that he should then turn around and stab their voters in the back and run against their chosen candidate. I mean, she goes on to say, we do not in any way accept that the bankrupt corporate politics of Joe Biden or Kamala Harris are an asset in defeating the right or represent the views or needs of working people. It is quite the opposite. If Biden and Kamala Harris are nowhere close to acceptable for her radical politics, one imagines a Bloomberg, a Warren, or Buttigieg would be even worse. And if you read on more, she actually goes on to talk about Warren being unacceptable as well. So how about when she says in 2016 and since, Sanders' self-identification as a, quote, democratic socialist, close quote, has played a big role in creating a mass discussion about socialist ideas, a process primarily driven by the failure of capitalism. Now, this woman, she even put the words democratic socialist in quotes herself. That's not me, that was her, and it indicates that she's clearly saying Bernie Sanders' ideas are in actuality socialist and that his self-identification are just a pose. Which is absolutely correct, because use common sense, just putting the word democratic in front of a word doesn't make it any less than what it is. Imagine trying to sell people on the concept of democratic fascism. I'm sure that such semantic games wouldn't get you very far. So before we accept the Chris Hayes silly theory, let's just ask him, if Bernie Sanders' agenda is in the quote-unquote Denmark category, why is he having a woman warm up the crowd of 16,000 people inside the Tacoma Dome at his campaign event before he came out to address them, a known socialist, a Trotskyist, Trotskyite, whatever you call him? Why would Bernie Sanders allow Kshama Sawant to give a speech to fire up his supporters with a speech that one assumes was vetted by his campaign, since it's his event, where she says things like,
Dear friends, my name is Kshama Sawant. I am the socialist on the Seattle City Council. Bernie's socialist campaign is poised to win from Massachusetts to California. A candidate who says billionaires should not exist. In any other country, Joe Biden and I would not be in the same party. And we need a powerful socialist movement to end all capitalist oppression. My organization, Socialist Alternative, is calling for 1 million people in Milwaukee to have Bernie's back. Solidarity.
that ain't Denmark, Chris Hayes. That's all for this new Unrealist. If you want to help the channel, do me a favor. Hit like for this video, leave a comment below, mash down the subscribe button if you're not already subbed to the channel, and click on the notification bell beside it. Put it on the all setting to keep up with newer content. If you want to contribute directly to the channel and toss your hard-earned dollars into the tip jar, follow links below to Patreon, Subscribestar, or PayPal. If you watch this on BitChute, you can just click on the green tip pledge button on the video player. Most importantly, though, thanks for watching.
He's pretty clearly in the Denmark category, yeah.
Are you sure? How do you know? Did he tell you that?
Well, I mean, that's what he says, and that's what his agenda calls for, right?
Yeah.
He's not calling for any...
Let's see. Let's figure that one out.